One of the first signs basketball season is upon us. The NBA schedule has been released, and we're here to talk all about it. I'm Madelyn Burke for LACtv, along with Eric Patten from Clippers.com. Eric, first of all, the Clippers start their season October 29th at Staples Center, but it'll be on the Lakers hardwood. Eric, what do you think about that starting the season?
Well, I can't really think of a better team to open the season against than the Lakers. And this year, there's two former Clippers, Chris Kaman and Nick Young, that could be in the Lakers starting lineup. And I guess the big mystery with that game will be if Kobe Bryant is healthy enough to take the floor.
That will be exciting. It'll definitely be a good way to kick off the season, but the Clippers have a pretty challenging road to start the season. 11 of their first 16 games are against playoff teams from last season. I think it'll set the bar as to show where this team actually is heading into the season.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're going to get to know how good this team is right away. And it's not too dissimilar to last year when the Clippers had a challenging stretch, a lot of those games at home. And it's similar in those 16 games as well. A lot of the games at home, but they're against teams like Memphis, Golden State, Houston with Dwight Howard. And then there's road games against Miami and Oklahoma City, among all of the other challenging games in that stretch. I think we're going to get a really good idea of how they stand.
Now, you mentioned road games. One of the things that I noticed about the Clippers schedule this season is they have not one, but two 7-game road trips, one in December and one in January for the Grammys trip, which usually comes in February, but they moved the awards up to January this year. So 2 7-game road trips. Not only are they kind of challenging for this team, but I also think it'll be beneficial, especially with the new coaching staff, a lot of the new guys that have been brought in. Road trips are really good places for teams to bond and get together, and having one as early as December, I think, should be pretty strong, right?
Well, definitely. I think last year you and I both saw firsthand that the China trip in October really kind of set that up for that bonding experience and really carried the Clippers in the first 2 or 3 months. This year, that bonding experience perhaps comes in December in the form of the 7-game road trip, which is the first time the Clippers have had a road trip of that length since 2004-05. This trip includes trips to Cleveland, who's revamped, Memphis, and then a game against Boston in the middle of the trip that is going to be pretty special.
December 11th, Boston. Doc Rivers' first trip back to the Garden as a Clipper, well, since 91-92 when he was playing for this team. But his first trip coaching this Clippers team to the Garden, what do you expect his reception there to be?
Well, I'd like to say that they will be very gracious towards the 9 years he spent there and the championship that he won alongside Kevin Garnett, Ray Allen, and Paul Pierce and Rajon Rondo. But in true Boston fashion, I think they will greet him, but with a shower of boos, just because he's not with the Celtics anymore.
Yes, it's definitely sad for them to see that era is over, but their loss is our gain, I guess, this season. One of my circle games was November 18th at Staples Center against the Memphis Grizzlies. Now, after these last 2 seasons, these two teams have had some pretty heated playoff runs and developed quite the rivalry. And whether or not they're the same exact intact roster, when you see those blue jerseys walking to Staples Center, it's going to be hard for Clippers fans to keep their blood from boiling.
Well, yeah, and a couple of the principal players for both teams are still there. Obviously, Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, Tony Allen, Mike Conley, and Zach Randolph, who I'm sure Clippers fans will greet with a shower of boos and not so nice things as well.
What about you? What game stood out for you?
Another one was a home game, but it's right after the All-Star break. San Antonio comes to Staples Center. It's actually the exact same setup as last season when, after a lengthy All-Star break, the Clippers come into the second half with a home game against San Antonio. And I think that that'll really set the tone for a challenging stretch right after the break. They've got at Memphis, at Oklahoma City, at New Orleans, immediately following that game against San Antonio. But the San Antonio one will really set the tone, I think, for the second half push.
Luckily, though, this team does have 6 days off for the All-Star break, which will be beneficial considering it's a safe bet to say that they might have more than one player going to New Orleans for the All-Star weekend this year. And 6 days off will be a good time for everyone to get their rest heading into the second half of the season, which, as you mentioned, has its challenges.
Well, it does, and I know one of the things that stood out to both of us was at the end of the season, there are 7 games in April, 5 of which are at home, all against the West, so that'll really set the table for the playoffs, and if there's seeding to be up for grabs, that could be determined then.
It should be an exciting season ahead, and we hope to see you along for the ride. Thank you so much for checking in here on LACtv. With Eric Patten from Clippers.com, I'm Madelyn Burke, and we'll see you next time.